It's a chapter on the optional salat times. My apologies. I'm going to go back. There's optional salat times and its supplications. It says so the first hadith, we'll just go for the English because we've already read it. It says from Habiba radiallahu anha that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever consistently prays 4 rakahs before dhuhr and 4 rakahs after dhuhr, he will be protected from the hellfire. So the key thing here then, as you mentioned, is consistency. Why? Because then it has the full effect, right? When you're consistent with exercise, consistent with whatever you do in life, education, whatever, it has the full effect. A. B is that when the angels, when you are busy, something happens and you're not able to do it, genuinely not able to do it, it's not because you were lazy, but you generally something else is a priority, i.e. in Allah's eyes, and you miss it, then the angels pray it for you. And C, it saves you from showing off. Like this is what you always do. So you have a fixed routine of how long and everything that happens. And then the next hadith, as well, we read the Arabic before. It says, may Allah show mercy on one who prays 4 rakahs before Asr, i.e. 2 and 2. Right? You pray 2 rakahs, give salams, and then 2 rakahs. And again, this is something we should do on a regular basis. Something that you can, if you cannot do on a regular basis, do it once and that's it. Just do it once. Alhamdulillah, you did it once, right? But we should always focus on our wird, right? Because the shaitan tries to get us to do other things. Do this dhikr, do this hadith, do this dua. Fantastic. Because he just doesn't want you to be consistent. Consistency, being consistent is the most important thing. And the nafs doesn't like consistency. It's because it finds it boring. But the ruh likes consistency because it's continually being nurtured, right? Those du'as that you've been saying since you were a kid, same du'as you say on a regular basis before going to sleep, those same kind of prayers, whatever it is, just stick at it. And Aisha radiallahu anha, and in the Shafi'i school, all of these prayers can be made up at any time of the day, right? So the Prophet ﷺ, for example, he missed, it was either 2 rakahs before or 2 rakahs after Asr, after Dhuhr, I can't remember, and he prayed it after Asr. So he missed his 2 rakahs after Dhuhr, and then he prayed it after Asr because he didn't have a chance to pray his sunnahs after Dhuhr, right? And so the Hanbalis, they say that's specific to that, right? That's specific, that sunnah mu'akkad that he missed, you can specifically. But the Shafis, they say any prayer, any sunnah prayer can be made up. And in fact, keeping this consistency, whatever you do consistently can be made up. So for example, you have a habit because, for example, your schedule is you always work at night. That you wake up 10 minutes, but you wake up with dhuhr and you pray 4 rakahs before dhuhr, and then you pray dhuhr, and then you have 4 rakahs after dhuhr, that every single day you pray 10 rakahs just as nafil after that. That's what you do every day. And today, schedule change, something happened, you can't pray 10 rakahs. Can you pray it after Asr or after Fajr? Yes, you can in the Shafi school. So anything you do on a regular basis can be made up. Right, and this is this, who is it? The author of this book, the book that we do in the Dajjal, this book here, the book here. So he used to pray, for example, I think every morning 100 rakats, something like that, right? Between something like that every morning, 100 rakats. So we would say to him, "Oh, you were able to? Go ahead, make as many of those you want up after Asr or after Fajr. It's fine." Right. So this was Abdul Ghani al-Maqdisi, the great Hanbali scholar. So, somebody who has that a wird that they do, something they regularly do this thing, right? They every single time before going to sleep, they pray 2 rakahs, for example. Every single time they get to work, they pray 2 rakahs. That's a thing that they do. That can be made up at any time. Day. And that whole idea of making it up is very important, right? And so, when life gets complex, it gets complex, and it's very difficult to do those things. But that's why we have to have that consistency, because life goes past and then you don't have anything to, right? Just like your diet, right? Life goes by and you had cake on Monday because of this, and cake on Tuesday because of this, and cake on Thursday. Basically, you're eating cake all the time, right? Life went past and you don't pray sunnahs on Monday because of this, or on Tuesday, or on Wednesday, or. So what you need to do then is come down with a realistic wird, a thing that you can do on a regular basis and stick to it. It doesn't, basically, it doesn't matter what happens. Basically, there are scenarios where you say, for Allah's sake, I'm not praying the sunnahs. I'm going to sleep, for example. For Allah's sake, I'm not going to go to the masjid. For Allah's sake, I have to leave the sunnah now and go to tend to something that's more important. Yes. But if that's the default, though, your default is that your life is crazy and you're running around doing crazy things all the time, then there's obviously something off. May Allah forgive us all. Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that the 2 rakahs before Fajr, right? When Fajr comes in, you pray 2 rakahs are better than the world and everything in it. All right. And many scholars, they consider this to be obligatory, right? That it's actually, you have to do it. Right? You can't miss it at all. عن عثمان بن عفان رضي الله عنهما عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال من صلى العشاء في جماعة فكأنما قام نصف الليل ومن صلى الصبح في جماعة فكأنما صلى الليل كله. Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever prays Isha in congregation is as if he has stood in prayer for half the night. And whoever prays Fajr in congregation, it is as if he has prayed the entire night. So Salat and Jama'ah is the most important sunnah of everything. Right? So there was a Sahabi, he missed or he was missing Fajr in the group. And Sayyidina Umar asked him, said, why are you missing Fajr in the masjid? He says, oh, I'm praying Tahajjud. And what happens is I'm praying Tahajjud for such a long time, I get super tired. And then Fajr comes in, I just pray my Fajr and go to sleep. He said, why do you do that? That doesn't make any sense. Right? So the default is we should get up before Fajr, pray whatever Tahajjud we can, wait for Fajr, and then go to the masjid. Right? If that's not possible, maybe he was awake last night, it's not possible with my schedule, whatever. Where is the priority? Tahajjud or praying in the group prayer? So praying the group prayer. Okay. If I can only go to one prayer of the day, what's the most important? Well, it seems like it's Fajr, right? Fajr and Isha, these are really, really important. I knew somebody who used to, for example, drive like Uber, taxi and Uber, and the Sheikh told him, he said, fine, I understand you're in different places, different times, right? It makes sense. But make sure you pray Fajr and Isha in Jama'ah. Right? Make sure you pray these, particularly in the summer, right? Summer is easier and harder, depends, right? It's really early, so you go, but you want to go back to sleep, but it's very difficult. But in winter, it's too late because you got to go to work, right? Sometimes it's things like that. But it's a priority, right? Praying, this is the most important sunnah, right? Is to pray in the masjid for these prayers. And Sahl ibn Sa'adin, obviously for a man, for a woman, it's by default not sunnah to pray in the masjid, unless, for example, she needs that. That's the only place that she can go, for example, for religious things, or the only time, etc. So the Prophet forbade men, the Prophet discouraged women going to the masjid and discouraged men stopping their wives going to the masjid. So it's makruh for a woman to go to the masjid by default, and it is makruh for a man to stop his wife going to the masjid, right? Which is interesting, right? So he is allowed to say you can't go, but he shouldn't do that. He's doing something wrong. And she is allowed to go to the masjid, but if she goes to the masjid, she's doing something wrong. She shouldn't do it by default, right? The default is a woman should pray at home. But again, there could be other considerations, for example, whatever, in a context, for example, where there's no religious gatherings anywhere. Where else is she going to see Muslims? Never, because she lives in a non-Muslim country and there's no Muslim gatherings and there's nothing. So the only time she ever sees a Muslim is in the masjid, then she should go to the masjid. Right? And Sahl ibn Sa'd radiallahu anhu, عن جبريل عليه السلام قال للنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم شرف المؤمن قيام الليل وعزه استغناؤه عن الناس. So Sahl ibn Sa'd al-Sa'idi relates that Jibreel said to the Prophet ﷺ, the honor and respect, the sharaf, the nobility, what is the standing in society, is qiyamuhu bil-layl, that he prays at night. And his dignity is that he doesn't need anything from anybody. Right? He doesn't need anything from anybody. He's not begging people for things. He doesn't see that his life is in his boss's hands. What will happen if I do this? Right? He sees that, for example, he fears Allah concerning his work, but if he's, for example, late for work or does his work badly, he's not scared of the boss. He's scared of Allah. And he's not scared of, I don't know. So there's lots of things that come in here in being independent. His independence from people. I don't need your approval, and I don't care about your disapproval, and I don't need your money, and I don't need this, and I don't need anything else. Right? So that's a very important thing. And people like this, people are scared of these people because anybody who is totally independent, you're quite a scary person. not like scared in a bad way, but it's a scared as an extreme reverence, right? Like someone like Malcolm X, right? I don't need your money. I don't need your approval. I don't need your support, right? It's very important. It's difficult, right? Sometimes you're in those situations. I remember once, I don't know how long ago, it was a long time ago. I was totally broke and I had an income, but it wasn't very good. And I remember I was selling perfume. So I used to wait outside the masjid, pray my sunnahs wait outside the masjid. And then I would approach certain people, right, outside the masjid. And I'd be, hey, I have some perfumes, very, very nice. Would you be interested? Da, 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 right? And so that's a real test of Iman, right? How do you look at somebody who is holding the keys to your rizq, right? They're holding the keys to your income or to whatever it is. They're the person who's going to have that, and you need it, right? So how do you carry yourself, right? So obviously you're going to try and sell and try and be a salesman and you need the money, but at the same time, you are in a situation, at the same time, it's totally in Allah's hands. So you have to be in two worlds at the same time, right? I need you to buy this, but I don't need you at all, right? So one is outwardly, I'm going to try and sell this thing to this person, try and ask him. Inwardly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the raziq, and I don't need you at all, right? Similarly, your child, you're rushing your child to the ER, and this thing happens, and then the child is in ICU and da 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 da. Doctor, please, like is the child's life in the doctor's hands? So how are you going to talk to that doctor, right? This is where it comes in, right? How are you going to talk to do you need the doctor? Do you feel you need the doctor and what the doctor says or what it doesn't say or what the nurses do, that's what's going to happen to the child? Or is it totally in Allah's hands? So it's going to change the way you ask the question. Of course, you're going to rush. Of course, you're going to run. Of course, you're going to, insist, I need to ask what's going on. But there's going to be a totally different way when you see it totally in Allah's hands. And I don't need the doctor, and I don't need the IC unit, and I don't know if they have oxygen or not oxygen. It's like that's irrelevant. Right? When you see it totally in Allah's hands, it's very, very different. So this is a huge thing, right? His dignity, but you don't need people. And so obviously somebody who goes down to impressing people by cussing, impressing people by dressing in a certain way, impressing people with these things, or changing their standards because of what people will say, what people won't say, these kind of things. This is a real test of Iman. This is where it comes down to, and this is on a daily basis for every single person, right? And it's not something small or big. I mean, it's not something small at all. It's something very big, right? That I just need Allah, right? وعن الحارث بن مسلم التميمي رضي الله عنه قال لي النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا صليت الصبح فقل قبل أن تتكلم اللهم أجرني من النار 7 مرات فإنك إن مت من يومك كتب الله لك جوارا من النار وإذا صليت المغرب فقل قبل أن تتكلم اللهم أجرني من النار 7 مرات فإنك إن مت من ليلتك كتب الله لك جوارا من النار. So Harith ibn Muslim at-Tamimi relates to me that the Prophet ﷺ said to me, when you have prayed Fajr, or when you pray Fajr, so it's not past tense, right? Either Salayta in Arabic, when you have prayed. Salayta, you have prayed, or you prayed. In a conditional sentence, it becomes when you pray, right? So it says when you pray, not when you have prayed, right? That's either kunta qad salayta, when you have prayed, right? So it's when you pray, right? When you pray Fajr. Right, so in a conditional sentence, the past tense is considered present. So the following say the following 7 times before you speak. Oh Allah, save me from the hellfire. But truly, if you die during that day of yours, Allah will write you a free pass out of the fire. And when you pray Maghrib, say the following 7 times before you speak. Oh Allah, save me from the hellfire. For truly, if you die during your night, Allah will write for you the free pass out of hellfire. So it says, An-Nasa'i fil Kubra. I'm not quite sure it says Kibri. Just typo here, Kubra. Right, so An-Nasa'i has Al-Kubra and Al-Sughra. the larger sunnah and the smaller sunnah. This is the larger sunnah. عن ثوبان رضي الله عنه قال كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا انصرف من صلاته استغفر ثلاثا وقال اللهم أنت سلام ومنك السلام تباركت يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. And so the Thoban said that the Prophet when the Prophet finished the prayer. So just a little note on how we write Arabic here. You see this wow, it should be connected, right? Because this should be like wasallama. It says wa, there's no space here. Right, wa, no space here. Yeah, the jalali, no space here. So I'm not sure why these things are here, but there's no space there. Right? There's no space between wow and the previous word, even though they're not the same word. So when the Prophet finished his prayer, he would say, "Oh, I seek Allah's forgiveness, astaghfirullah," 3 times, right? So astaghfirullah for my sins. Astaghfirullah from looking around and aiming at anything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in my prayer or anything else. And astaghfirullah from anything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Astaghfirullah for my sins. Astaghfirullah from focusing on anything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in my prayer or in my life. And astaghfirullah from anything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you also say, "Oh Allah, you are the source of peace, and from you comes all peace. Blessed are you, O possessor of generosity, majesty and generosity." وعن معاذ بن جبل رضي الله عنه قال أخذ رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم بيدي يوما ثم قال يا معاذ والله إني لأحبك فقال معاذ بأبي وأمي يا رسول الله وأنا والله أحبك فقال أوصيك يا معاذ لا تدعن دبر كل صلاة أن تقول اللهم أعني على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك. Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu, he took me by the hand one day. He was I had a class at university on the balagha in the Quran and Hadith. And one of our assignments was to look at the body language of the Prophet ﷺ. The rhetoric, but balagha and rhetoric and how the amazing eloquence of the Prophet ﷺ's body language. Right? It's a lot of body language. Prophet ﷺ was very physical, right? And so he's very un-British, right? British people, they don't like physical contact, and they don't like again Northern Europeans, right? There's a whole thing like space, right? Get out of my space, and not being physical contact. They don't like it, right? And so that's the opposite of the Prophet, lots of physical contact. So the Prophet, he said he took the Prophet Mu'adh ibn Jabal, who's buried in Jordan. He took me by the hand and said, "Oh Mu'adh, I swear by Allah, I love you." So I said, "May my mother and father be sacrificed for you." So that's a phrase meaning, if there were a situation, O Messenger of Allah, I wish that I and all those dear to me, like my mother and father, would take the place and take the pain instead of you. That's what it means. Like, I love you so much, O Messenger of Allah. If there was a situation where, for example, someone were to be hurt, I wish it would be me and all those whom I love, like my father and mother, in place of you, O Messenger of Allah. وَأَنَا وَاللَّهِ أُحِبُّكَ. Right? And this is a sunnah the Prophet told us. It said that if you love somebody, for the sake of Allah, you should tell them. Right? You should tell them. You shouldn't be like, "Oh, I feel awkward about saying that." You should tell them, say, so-and-so, for the sake of Allah, like, I really, really, I appreciate what you're doing, and I think it's amazing, and you really, you should say things like that. Obviously, if you're, you should say something that would possibly make them proud. That's arguably or haram in certain situations. When you praise somebody to make them proud, that's haram in certain situations. But we should be, but by default, we should do that. So فَقَالَ أُوصِيكَ يَا مُعَاذ. So he said, "O Messenger of Allah, and I, by Allah, love you." He said, right? And subhanAllah, what do we find? That people don't do this between friends, and they don't even do this between husband and wife. Right? So you go to a husband and say, "Do you appreciate everything your wife has done for you?" She's like, "Yeah, of course." Do you ever tell her that? It's like, "No." He's like, "Of course." He's like, "Let's go and ask her. Has he ever told you that I appreciate this and this and this and this and this and this and this?" So, right? Or vice versa. Do you appreciate the fact that your husband works and he brings an income and he's done this and does this and does this and does this? Says, "Yeah." Do you ever tell him? Of course. Let's go and ask him. Do you ever, is this something you hear from your wife? She's like, "No, I never hear that. I say anything like that." Oh, it was obvious from the context. Really? Right? It was obvious from the context that I appreciated those things. Do you say that to your parents? Do you tell it to your brother and sister? No, right? So we have a major problem with emotional stinginess. Like we're emotionally stingy. We don't want to say things that are nice. We were very happy to say bad things. Why are you late? What did you do this for? What happened? This, that. But when it comes to expressing, right, or teenagers, right, they're very happy to insult each other, but never going to say anything nice to each other, right? I remember the first time I was in Jordan, first time hearing people comment, a man commenting on another man's hair. I thought it was the most effeminate thing ever. Like, why would you do that? If somebody has a haircut, they say, for example, in Jordan, they say na'iman, right? It's a thing in the Levant, na'iman, nice haircut, right? I was like, that's unbelievably effeminate to comment on someone's haircut. Because in England, if somebody has a haircut, you might laugh at them, but you don't comment on them. I mean, maybe between women it's different, but you might laugh at somebody. You don't comment on them. That's considered effeminate. To say a compliment about someone's hair is very effeminate. So you might say, for example, what happened between you and the lawnmower, right? As a joke, as in, for example, he had an accident with the lawnmower. So you're happy to criticize as a joke, but you don't have the ability to say nice things to people. That's a real problem, right? It's a real problem. And I noticed even if you look in Shakespeare, Shakespeare has a lot of these things. For example, like we in English, we can't say I love you to your friend. That sounds really weird, right? Maybe some girls might say that sometimes to each other, right? Maybe. But do you say that to a man? That sounds really weird, right? Whereas in Shakespeare, which is not that long ago, perhaps there was just a very different culture, right? That's what 500 years ago, it's not that long ago. I had a different culture where you could actually express emotions. So we have a major problem. Certain generations and certain people and certain nations have a major problem in expressing emotions, but the Prophet ﷺ did not have problems in expressing emotions. He was extremely sensitive. He was extremely emotionally intelligent. He was extremely empathetic, and he was really good at expressing his emotions, right? Really, really good, which is really, really important. And there's nothing effeminate about that whatsoever, right? And he said, I advise you, O Mu'adh, to not miss. So here, to not miss, it should be to not dare miss. To not dare miss. La tada'anna. To not dare miss saying that after every salah. Oh Allah, aid me in remembering you, thanking you, and worshiping you in a beautiful way, the best way, right? For example, when is it the right time to miss a sunnah? When is it right time, for example, to go to sleep and pray Isha 2 minutes before Fajr? Sometimes that is the best thing to do, but sometimes not. So how are you going to choose? When is the best time not to read Quran today? Like just put it down, don't read it. When's the best time, for example, to just not do anything and just relax and like how do I prioritize things in my life? So Allah help me choose things that are not clear, choose the right thing. What is the best thing to do? Worship you in a better way, best way. How do I emphasize, how do I balance the multiple things in my life? Like, where's a priority? Right? It's very difficult. I'm a mother, for example, Sister Saada, a mother, right? Is this Sister Saada here or is this one of the kids?
It's me and the boys, Sheikh Farid.
Okay. Anyway, so good example, right? The boys are there as well. Okay, so Sister Saada, as a mother, what is husna ibadati? What is proper way of worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Should I spend time cooking for the kids because then they will appreciate me and then listen to me when I tell them, guys, you need to do the deen? Or should I prioritize myself and teach them how to look after the mother? That's quite a difficult thing. Say, guys, you got to cook today. That's a quite a difficult calculation to make, given that you could be tired, given that it could be a million things, right? Like how much you're going to push the kids, right? Like for me, for example, with my kids, it's always like pushing them as hard as possible, right? When is that cruel though? Right? Obviously, when you can feel that it's being cruel and hard, and they're crying and something like that, but keep pushing up the hill, or should you give them a break, right? Um, so a lot of these things, how to, yes, Allah, please, I honestly, I don't know how to worship you in a nice and beautiful way. I don't know how to prioritize my life. And there's lots of things that I could be doing, lots of things that are sunnah, right? That I could be doing. Should I be focusing on this? Should I be focusing on that? It's a really hard thing. Like, so it's a huge thing to say to Allah. You're not only asking Allah to help you, you're also saying, oh, Allah, help me do what you want from me. Because I don't want to do things that you don't want from me. Right? Ya Allah, I love you, oh Allah, and I want to do things that you want me to do. And I don't want to prioritize things that you don't prioritize, or to not prioritize something you do prioritize. Right? So this is it's a huge dua. Like it's not a small dua whatsoever. وعن أبي أمامة رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من قرأ آية الكرسي دبر كل صلاة لم يمنعه من دخول الجنة إلا أن يموت. Right, that Abu Umama radiallahu anhu narrates the Prophet ﷺ said, nothing prevents a person who recites Ayat al-Kursi after every salah from entering paradise except his death. Right? All you need to do is die, basically. So Ayat al-Kursi, say it after every single prayer. Right? And so again, what we should have, like we have in the masjid, here's the thing, you say these adhkar and you stick to them all the time. Right? Again, unless certain things happen. Right? So it says an-nasa'i, not nisa'i. Right? So it's an-nasa'i. Okay, fil kubra. Okay. Virtues of the Holy Quran and its people, may Allah make us of them. عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال إن لله أهلين من الناس قالوا يا رسول الله من هم؟ قال هم أهل الله هم أهل القرآن وأهل الله وخاصته. So Anas ibn Malik narrates the Prophet ﷺ said, truly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has an entire elite group that among people. He says Ahleen. Ahleen is literally family. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a family. Like how can Allah have a family? He doesn't have any kids or a wife or anything. It doesn't make sense. Right? What it means is from the word ahl is you're deserving of somebody, right? To be deserving. Ahl means anta ahlu taqwa wa ahlu maghfirah means the one that you deserve to fear and ward off and whose punishment you deserve to ward off. Wa ahlu maghfirah and the one who is likely to forgive you. Right? Wa anta ahlun lidhalik, like you deserve that. Right? So ahl means the one who like they're deserving of you, they're your family. So there's these certain people that have this very special relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If they ask things from him, he's not going to say no. قالوا يا رسول الله من هم, who are these people? They said they're people of the Quran, Ahl al-Quran. Right? And the Prophet referred to Ahl al-Quran other places. Inna Allah witrun yuhibbul witr fa'awtiru ya Ahl al-Quran. Prophet said, and indeed Allah is an odd number and he loves odd numbers, so do odd numbers. I pray witr, O people of the Quran. Right? So they are Ahlullah, the people of the Quran are the people of Allah's chosen people and His special ones. Right? So we have to so again, so the default then is what we have a juz every day, right? If we are able to memorize the Quran, we should do so. If we're able to memorize some of the Quran, we should do so, right? And whatever we memorize, that should be part of our sunnah prayers, etc. And that every single day we should recite our juz, right? So that we finish the Quran in a month. If we can't do that, then at least we read some. If you can't do that, at least open the page, right? And if you can't do that, at least listen to it, right? So you can't read a whole juz, then read some of it. Can't read some of it, at least listen to it. Can't listen to it, at least open the page and look at it, right? I'm going to time myself to do that, right? Saada, any of the boys have a stopwatch with them?
They have a what, Sheikh Farid?
A stopwatch?
No.
Like no phone or anything with a stopwatch on them?
Oh, here, I have my phone.
Okay. So maybe we can have one of the boys, Sister Saada, just a text because I'm trying to make a point to them.
Uh-huh.
If they can get the
But before
stopwatch.
Sheikh Farid, Ibrahim actually had a question for you.
Okay,
What do you
Bismillah.
mean? What do you mean by Allah's odd?
You said with
Allah loves odd numbers. You know, odd numbers, Ibrahim, like 1, 3, 5. That's an odd number, right? So Allah loves odd numbers. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is an odd number. He is one.
Understand?
Yeah.
Okay. Jazakallah khair. So you want a stopwatch?
Yeah, so maybe Ibrahim can do a stopwatch. He give me a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Ibrahim. I'm going to time myself, Ibrahim. How long it takes to stand up from where I'm sitting right now, open a mushaf, look at the page, and sit down again. Okay, let's see how long it takes. Okay, give me a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, Ibrahim, okay?
3, 2, 1, say it.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Not you.
Okay, That's it. How long did it take?
How long, Ibrahim?
So 19.78 seconds.
Okay. So somebody tells me they don't have 20 seconds in the day to do that. Right? Now I can understand I'm being bombed. Okay. I can understand that. I have excruciating headache. Okay, fine. Like I need to sleep now. That's it. Okay, fine. I understand. That makes sense. But a normal person in a normal, crazy, busy day, where they have exams, where they have kids, where they have triplets, where they have like, and most people in a normal 24-hour day has 20 seconds to get up and open the Mus'haf, even if they can't read it, right? Like I don't even know what it says. I can't even read this. I don't know what it says in Arabic. I don't even know. I just see pictures. I don't even know what those letters are. Just do that at least, right? Otherwise, it's like subhanAllah, it's very sad, right? You didn't even do that. So you didn't read your juz, fine. You didn't do half a juz, fine. You didn't do one page, fine. You didn't do one line, okay. You couldn't even play it in the car, okay. You honest to God, you didn't have 20 seconds to pick up the Mus'haf and look at it. That's very, very sad, right? That's very sad. May Allah forgive us and protect us all, right? And so that's a disease, right? That's a disease, right? And let's take an analogy, right? Let's take an analogy. Ibrahim is here, okay? Or Munira is here as well, right? So Munira, she goes to do her master's in Michigan, okay? Inshallah. And her dad is like, just give me a call, right, in the evening when you have time. And she doesn't call for 2 weeks. 2 weeks she doesn't call. Ibrahim does the same thing. Ibrahim goes to Quran camp in Saudi. Okay. You're gonna go with Ahmed and Ibrahim, they're gonna go to Quran camp. And his mom says, please just call, in the evening when you guys finish eating and whatever, please just call. Okay. And for 2 weeks, Ibrahim doesn't call. For 2 weeks, Ibrahim does not call. Right. He's like, and they come back and say, I didn't have time. Like, really? You didn't have time to call in 2 weeks? Okay, the first day you arrived and this happened, the second day, it was the third day, is like, but in 2 weeks you didn't have time. That's neglect. That's like you didn't care, right? That's not nice, right? And so with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't get offended. You can't offend Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us, as the Prophet described it, as the banquet. I'm saying, inviting you to my banquet. This is a free buffet. Come and eat. Come and enjoy. Come and benefit. And you don't have 20 seconds to get up or 15 seconds to get up and just look at the Mus'haf. That's a problem, right? And so all of us, we should say, no, 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 you can't. That's not acceptable. You should not accept that from yourself, right? That you cannot play it. You couldn't see it. You couldn't look at it. You couldn't read one line. You couldn't do one thing. That's very, very sad, right? May Allah protect us all and make us of the people of Quran. And obviously, when we say that people who are of the Quran, it means people who want to apply the Quran, right? People who want to apply the Quran. So nobody, I believe it was Hassan al-Basri, he mentioned this. He said, people say that they've read the Quran. It's like, what do you mean you read the Quran? I read the whole Quran. Really? You read the whole Quran? How? So yeah, it was Ramadan. I did a khatam. I read the whole Quran. So alhamdulillah happens. And I was like, no, you didn't. So what do you mean? No, I didn't. Did you apply the whole Quran? Because that's what it means, right? You read it to reflect on it, and you reflect on it in order to apply it. So when you apply the whole of the Quran, now we can start saying you've read the Quran, right? That's what it means, that you have applied it, right? So there's one scholar, particular scholar, he would take one hadith, one verse of the Quran on a piece of paper and just go, travel away, and sit there for one whole day and just reflect, how am I supposed to apply this hadith in my life? How am I supposed to apply this verse of the Quran in my life? Right? That's qira'at al-Quran, that's reading the Quran, as opposed to, and so alhamdulillah, somebody who just looks at it, there was a barakah looking at the verse, is a barakah, you're looking, you're doing something that's good. But we should be careful not to do that, to make sure we do that properly. Sorry, I skipped a number of things. Where did we get to? And then Allah, the Prophet mentioned, وعن أبي أمامة رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال اقرأ القرآن فإنه يأتي يوم القيامة شفيعا لأصحابه. Abu Umama radiallahu anhu said the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, recite the Quran, for truly it will come on the day of judgment as an interceding for its people. So it's there, it's your lawyer on judgment day. You are suffering on judgment day. You are about to be thrown in the hellfire on judgment day. You're being thrown to the hellfire on judgment day. It will be saying, hang on a minute, Allah, He used to recite me. He used to recite me. Right? It will take on a form. And for example, and there are also the people of Surah Mulk, people who used to recite Surah Mulk frequently, right? Surah Yasin. These things will take on forms and say, "Oh Allah, please protect him, because he used to recite me, right? This had a particular relationship with me. He used to look at this verse and think, very scared. For example, وَيْلٌ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ, unbelievably scary hadith verse of the Quran. وَيْلٌ لِلْمُطَفِّفِينَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا اكْتَالُوا عَلَى النَّاسِ يَسْتَوْفُونَ وَإِذَا كَالُوهُمْ أَوْ وَزَنُوهُمْ يُخْسِرُونَ. If you applied that in your life, you'd be one of the best people ever. Woe to those who do tatfif, who aren't fair. When they get something from people, they get the whole thing. But when they give, they only give half. So it may be it in your work. You're very happy to receive your salary, but you're not happy to do your work properly. You're very happy, for example, to demand your rights as a husband or a wife, but you're not happy to give it back. You're very happy to complain as a son you're not happy to give the rights to your parents. You're very happy to complain as a mother or a father, but you're not happy to give the rights to your kids. Etc. You're very happy to complain about the government, but you're not giving the American people their rights, for example, or whoever you live with, right? And so all of us, may Allah forgive us all, are in this situation where, recite the Quran, and it's going to be a shafa'ah. Whenever this person used to come by, he used to avoid those verses out of fear for them, or who's super scared, or was very depressed and worried after reciting them, right? This means Ahl Quran, people who are reciting the Quran and reflecting. So these people now is going to come, and Allah's going to that will take that your worry and concern that you had, that will take form on Judgment Day, and it will be there standing next to you saying, no, he's a good guy, don't throw him into hellfire, right? He's going to be your lawyer on Judgment Day. وعن عثمان بن عفان رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال خيركم من تعلم القرآن وعلمه. Uthman ibn Affan rates the Prophet ﷺ said, the best of you is the one who learns the Quran and teaches it. So it doesn't just mean doing tajweed or memorizing. That's not what it means, right? That's part of it, of course, but we have to have our tajweed, and we have to learn how to apply it in our lives. So people who learn, they take on the knowledge of the Quran in terms of tajweed, in terms of memorization, in terms of understanding. And those who teach it to other people, they share that through. And what is the best type of teaching? As example, right? May Allah forgive us all. عن عبد الله بن عمر رضي الله عنهما عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال إنما مثل صاحب القرآن كمثل الإبل المعلقة إن عاهد عليها أمسكها وإن أطلقها ذهبت. Abdullah ibn Umar writes that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, certainly the example of the companion of the Quran is like the example of a tethered camel. You get a camel and you tie it up. If one attends to it, it remains. Go and check, is the camel still there? If one neglects it, you don't tie it properly, and then you don't check up on it, right? It escapes. So the same thing with the Quran. I memorized that surah, next surah. No, you have to review. You have to review, and you have to reflect, and you have to go back to things. Right? There'll be a verse of the Quran that you've read 50,000 gazillion times, and you come back to it, subhanAllah, saying, it really says that in the Quran? That's shocking. That means this, that means this, that means this, right? Shocking verses. Right? The verses that should shock us at least, right? And going back to what does it talk about? What's going on? Right? Reviewing again and again and again and again. So the Quran, we have to understand, is very different to a hadith. In terms of how the Prophet taught. The Prophet said the Quran thousands of times. Right? Or I could say at least 1,000 times. Well, I guess how many times did he say the whole thing? I don't know, but multiple times. So in terms of how many times as a Sahabi, how many of times would you have heard Surah Al-Asr versus how many times you heard this hadith, right? You might only heard this hadith once or twice. So perhaps he said it once or twice, right? Maybe 3 times, as opposed to The Quran is this thing that we're going to go back to again and again and again and again and again and remind ourselves and make mistakes and make tawbah and remind ourselves, no, that's not what it says. Remember, we're not supposed to be doing this, right? So many times like that, subhanAllah. The most basic things that just escape us. May Allah forgive us. وعن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال ليس منا من لم يتغنى بالقرآن. Abu Hurairah narrates the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever does not use a melody when reciting the Quran is not of us. Right? And so the default then is when we recite the Quran, right? And this is very important for boys. Again, if boys are listening, is when you're at home, you recite the Quran aloud. You do not go and pray Fajr, Maghrib or Isha as if you are doing time out. Prayer is not time out. You pray properly. You make wudu, you stand properly, you pray properly, you have a nice voice, use it. I should hear your voice. It's not something that should be done quietly, right? Even if you're praying by yourself because you missed the Jama'ah with your brothers or mum or whatever it is, right? And so we should recite properly. For women, they should recite aloud, but they shouldn't be as loud as men do, right? And they shouldn't do that in the presence of non-mahrams, right? So, for example, a woman's praying out Maghrib by herself, a non-mahram comes in the room, then she just recites quietly to herself, right? Now, another explanation of this hadith is totally different, right? Which is whoever lam yastaghni bil Quran. Whoever yastaghanna means become ghani, become free of need for the Quran. I.e., whoever doesn't find everything that they need in the Quran, and the Quran doesn't make them free of need of everything else, is not of us, right? So somebody who doesn't really, like the Quran is not really, they don't really identify with it. It's not really their thing. It's like one of these things that I just do, but it's not like their thing, right? The Quran, it should be our thing, right? You know, as one scholar, he said, you know, like the Quran, if it's not part of our flesh and bones, then it's like, it's not really, you're not really kind of, you don't understand what we're talking about, right? And so, may Allah forgive us all. And this is the picture here. But so that's a totally different meaning, right? And again, there's a fiqh issue again. Some fuqaha, they talk about the issue about reciting Quran in a melodic voice. One of the problems that happens sometimes is because they don't understand what you mean by a melodic voice, right? So melody is you know, obviously a voice is a sound frequency, and then you have a particular mathematical relationship between these the distance, the gaps between each note that you use, right? That makes a tune, right? It could be what's called like a major tune, like what major or minor or various things like that, right? And so, for example, traditional scholars, they recite the Quran is different, what called the maqamat, right? The Hijaz, for example, like in the adhan of Saudi kind of tune, or bayat, or these different tunes, right? These are certain scales, right? The traditional Eastern scales, right? Or you have, for example, the maqam al-khumasi, what they use, for example, in Somalia or Sudan. It's totally different. It's called a pentatonic scale. So they're dividing up what we call the octave, right? An octave where you have the, you know, say A, and then you go through the scale and get to A again. That's an octave, and they break that up into 5. So the gaps between each note is totally different. So it doesn't sound like Western music at all. It doesn't sound like it sounds different, right? This has a very distinct and noticeable tune. It's called al-maqam al-khumasi, and there are other things as well like that, right? So the point is, you're supposed to have a nice sound. Okay, should that sound affect your Quran and change the timing and how you recite? No. So one is the frequency, the gap between the frequencies that you use. Okay, that's the melody. And the other one is now the tune, which is the time. So now you're going to sing, for example, the Fatiha to a tune, right? And you will change it. So I remember hearing once from Morocco, there's this really beautiful song. I was like, wow, that's such a beautiful song. What song is that? It's like, oh, that's Surah Al-Muzammil. I was like, huh? That's not Surah Al-Muzammil. Because they're changing the words, making something longer or shorter, right? And so you can't do that. You have to stick to the rules of tajweed. And so if you're going to force a tune onto the Quran by changing the tempo and now making it into a tune and now stretching this word and shortening this word, you cannot do that at all. right? And the commentator in the book mentions that. But some people, again, they don't quite understand what you mean by a tune, or they think they don't difference between a tune and a melody. They're not quite the same things, or perhaps a melody and tune. We're talking about the notes that you use, right? So now we have two scenarios: somebody who recites the Quran who is tone deaf and it doesn't sound nice, versus somebody who recites the Quran and it sounds nice, right? So you should try and not, most people are not tone deaf. They should try and recite the Quran in a nice way, right? In a very nice way. And so that's what we should do, including women, right? But again, women should not be as loud as men. Okay, well, inshallah, we'll stop there. We'll come back to this, inshallah, visiting the sick and making dua, supplicating for them, inshallah. We'll come to this, inshallah, next week. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi sallam. Subhanallah wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.